Hello and welcome to the Connect with Control-M series from BMC Software. My name is Rafi Eredjan and I'm a tech support analyst with the Control-M distributed side of the house. And today we will be giving you a presentation on Control-M Forecast. Let's quickly take a look at the agenda items for today. And we will begin with an overview and definition of what Control-M Forecast component is. Then look at how to implement it in your existing Control-M Enterprise Manager installation. We will then step into a live demo system and show you a couple things. Then we will go to a review of a couple items there, show you some tips and tricks, and finally open the forum for some question and answers. Now, while we're doing the presentation, you may go ahead and type in your questions in the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So why don't we go ahead and get started here. Now, Control-M Forecast. Let's say you set up all your scheduling criteria for your job, but you want to make sure that the job will actually schedule in the specific day that you expect. Well, Control-M Forecast is a plugin that gets installed in the Enterprise Control Manager, and it allows you to do exactly that with just a couple mouse clicks, and it gives you some graphical and tabular versions of how to view the predicted schedule. A very neat feature is that it would allow you to simulate a job flow. Let's say you had a number of jobs within a particular folder or table and you want to see their interaction on a future date, and you can represent that graphically there in the simulation. You can also do a why analysis and what-if scenarios. Now let's say you've got certain dependencies between jobs. You may have certain resources that may or may not get posted at a certain time, or simply that the time frame for the specific jobs will change. The what-if scenarios and why analysis would let you do that. Now, as far as implementing Control-M Forecast, as I mentioned before, this is an additional plugin. It does not get included with your default install of Control-M Enterprise Manager Server. If you have any questions, whether you may be licensed for this product, you can contact your BMC sales rep to make sure. And once you have your license, you can obtain the software from our electronic product download site at the link mentioned there. And it's basically an activation. You run the setup for Forecast on your Enterprise Manager server host, after which it will create the necessary defaults in there for you. And finally, you go into your Configuration Manager GUI and define the Forecast component. Now, we will be doing a live demo here, and I just want to go over at a high level what we're planning to do. First, we will define the Forecast component in the CCM GUI and check a couple items with it. Next, we will check to see when a specific job is scheduled to run and go through a couple scenarios there. We will simulate a future job flow using the Forecast domain. We will then look at different formats that you can display that simulation in. And finally, we will take a quick look at the Forecast CLI, which allows you to run your forecast in a batch mode. Now, to continue, let me go on to our demo system here. And as you can see, the first item we see here is the Control-M Configuration Manager, and we have the Forecast component defined here. As you can see, the type column shows forecast_server. The host is our CTM QProd system. The state is up. The desired state is up. The message is OK. And over to the right-hand side, we can see that the last check time is updated there and the operating system on which this is running. And finally, the version, which is version 8, Fixpack 200. Let's quickly look at the properties of Forecast Server and look at a couple items there. As you can see, the first component there is desired state of up, and then the type is forecast underscore server, and the next component is called GUI server name. If you only have one GUI server defined in your environment, then this field can be left blank, and the forecast component will simply bind to the default GUI server. For environments where you might have multiple GUI servers defined, let's say for load balancing purposes, you could easily specify a different GUI server to bind to. Now in the middle of the screen here we have running on the host name, which is ctmqprod. Finally, we have in the general section a 20-second interval where this process is checked to make sure that it's up and running. Now I'll go ahead and close that window. I want to show you one additional thing that might come in handy. Now we have what's called a Control-M-EM control shell. Now this is available not only for forecast server but also for all the other components defined in EM over here. And I want to show you a couple things here. Now control shell is basically an internal command line where you can send parameters or settings or even debug to a particular process. And what you can do is type help here and click apply, and it will give you the usage. Now one thing I want to mention here is that let's say if you log a trouble ticket for forecast, we might ask you to run various debug params, and you can see here like we have the diag command, which is diag on or off, and the diag L, which will set a specific debug level, and there will be specific debug that we can give you instructions depending on the issue that you encounter. And one other thing I want to mention here, let's say there's a sync underscore daily. If you deal with mainframe data centers in your environment and you want to, let's say, synchronize any user dailies defined on the mainframe, you could use this particular command to let forecast be aware of those particular dailies. So that's just a quick overview of the forecast component, how it's defined here. And let's go ahead and do an actual simulation and take a look at what forecast can offer you. Now what I'm looking at here is the workload automation GUI. And as you can see, we are in the planning domain, and we have a number of folders and jobs loaded. The first job I want to take a look at is called daily underscore sales, and as its job name implies, this job is run on every day, and it uses a calendar called workdays. And for the purposes of this particular job, the workdays calendar has every weekday scheduled except for holidays. And let's say we wanted to find out when this job would run during this particular year. The beauty of forecast is that I can simply go to the job, right-click it, and select the View Schedule from the drop list. And within a few moments, this will bring up the future scheduling of this job. Now looking at the month of December, we can see that the 23rd and 24th, the job will not run, but all the other days it will. And that is correct since our Christmas holiday is on those particular days. We can go through the rest of the year, and for example, we can look in May, and the 27th is also a non-scheduled date. And also we see in September 2014 that the 2nd is not a scheduled date. So this gives us a very quick and easy way to confirm when this particular job will run. Now let's look at a second example. And as this particular job says, it's a monthly sales report job. And the scheduling criteria is quite simple. It basically runs on the 15th day of each month. Now, in order to do the forecast, again, we can easily right-click the job, select a View Schedule, and here we see that in every single month for December 2013 and on to the year 2014, it is scheduled on the 15th of every month. So that gives us a confirmation on the scheduling criteria being set up correctly. Now let's say you've got a much more complex schedule. Let's look at something called periodic sales. And in this particular job, note that we're using a calendar called annual periods. And basically, just a high-level overview, we've separated the year into 4 periods, A, B, C, and D, each period having 3 months. And the criteria for this particular job ordering in, you can see the L6P asterisk, which means 6 days from the end of each period. Then we have D6P asterisk, which is 6 days after the start of each period, and D15P asterisk, which is the 15th day from the start of each period. Now, if you were to try to figure this out in your head, the periodic calendar would be quite complex. So how about we go ahead and just right-click the job and do another view schedule and confirm that our scheduling criteria is correct. So we see here in the month of December, the job is scheduled for the 26th, which if you count back from the end of the period, which would basically be the end of the year, 6 days, 26th would match up perfectly. The next period starts in January 2014, and January 6th would be the 6th day from the start of the period. January 15 would be the 15th day at the start of the period. And moving all the way over to March here, 2014, that would be the 26th, which would be the 6th day from the end of that period. So here you see a fairly complex scheduling criteria for a job, and we were able to easily view the forecast for it. Now let's take a look at a different way to look at forecast. Let's say you have a number of tables that you want to forecast together, and what the forecast domain allows you to do is specify various filter parameters that you want to use. For this example, we'll take a look at jobs that should be running on Friday, December 13th. And as you can see, you could easily select the day and the month over here in the date parameter. The what if box here, if we click this, you can see that I have saved a couple scenarios here. And basically, when you run a forecast simulation, you could save the results onto your EM server in the database. And let's say you wanted to replay what you saw there or the particular actions you performed. You could recall it here and quickly load that forecast that was saved. Next, we move into the folders and jobs section, where we're basically putting filter criteria to select the various jobs that we want. And for this particular scenario, we will look at a folder named payroll and the jobs included in it. And of course, we're using our data center CTM QProd. If you wanted to further fine-tune the filter criteria, you could select application, job name, member name, and so on. The next section is called services, and if you had any batch impact manager services defined for these particular jobs, you could employ those services as well in the scenario. For this particular scenario, we will skip the services. Now, moving down to the bottom of the screen, we see that we have an item called Use Calendars. And if I click the drop list here, you have the option of using your own checked out calendars, the user ID that you're logged on as with this GUI. You could select all the checked out calendars. And the third option is only checked in calendars. Now let's say you are working on a calendar, fine-tuning the scheduling dates on it, and just wanted to apply that particular calendar scenario. You could select this item and apply it to the forecast. Now for this particular scenario, I'm going to just select the all checked out calendars. Now the next item here is called job runtime. And what Forecast does is it uses the statistics maintained by the Enterprise Manager server in order to calculate how long each particular job in that scenario will run. And you have the option of selecting either the minimum, the maximum, or the average runtime of the particular job. For this scenario, we will just focus on using the average runtime of the jobs. And finally, the last item is a checkbox which says ignore global conditions. Now let's say you have multiple data centers you're monitoring in your Enterprise Manager system, and the ignore conditions would basically allow you to focus in only on the specific jobs in that data center. Any conditions that need to be posted or determined from other data centers will be ignored, and this allows you to do a quicker load on the particular scenario. Since we've selected all the criteria, I will simply go to the bottom right of the screen and select Open, and it will load our forecast scenario for us. As you can see here, this loaded the payroll jobs, and we have a couple jobs here from expense reimbursements, salary employees, hourly employees, all ending into one specific job called paycheck processing. The beauty of this screen is that on the right-hand side, you can see a quick summary of the particular jobs. We can see that 2 of our jobs did not run and 3 ended okay. So what can we do here to determine why this particular jobs did not run? Let's take a quick look at this expense reimbursement job. Now, since we're running a scenario, and obviously this job has to post a condition in order for this particular series of jobs to end successfully, let's right-click the job and select the Y option. And you'll notice that this brings up a simulation window. We can see that at the new date time, the job was ordered by automatic daily. And next we see the issue why the job has not run. It is actually waiting for a manual user confirmation. So what we can do here in order to proceed with the simulation is to just click Add here. And this brings up a what if confirmation. If you recall, we were talking about this in a couple of the slides before. So the confirm can be done at average start time of the job, at the order time of the job, at a specific time, or we can simply select not to confirm. And underneath we can also type in the specific criteria. So let's go ahead and confirm this job and see what happens in our simulation. So I clicked OK there. And as you can see, the confirm was done by a what-if scenario. Now the job still has a wait for start time window from 3 p.m. until 4 p.m. But the simulation did actually complete. And what we could also do is go ahead and click Add on the wait time as well and see what kind of options that give us. Now we can we get another confirmation, and we can just select the defaults here or select specific time frames and click OK. So you can see that this changed some things in the job a little bit. The start time is 7 a.m. and it's submitted and completed within 25 minutes, and the simulation ended. So there we have it. We were able to simulate this particular job flow and figure out that particular job needed a manual confirm in order for this particular flow to complete successfully. Now, let's say that you have quite a few jobs in your simulation and you wanted an easier way to take a look at this. We were taking a look at the map view, and there are a couple other options here we can investigate. The second is the list view, and just by selecting the list icon there, we can see that the jobs themselves are in a list view here. You have the actual folder name and the individual jobs, as well as the various parameters for each job. We can see on the right-hand corner here that this particular job is the confirmed job that we took a look at. And I'm just going to slowly scroll to the right here and show some other parameters that are available that you can see. And you can also have a look here that the start and the end execution times are displayed in this particular screen. Now, let's take a look at another neat feature. Let's say you want a graphical format of what you're viewing, and we have a Gantt view that we can also show here. So I'm going to click the Gantt icon here in the toolbar. Now this brings up a time table. We can see that December 15th is highlighted there, so I'm going to scroll back to the left here until we come to the specific date, December 13th, where we ran the simulation. Now as you can see, for the particular data center, which is this first line I'm highlighting here, this particular job flow took place between 7 in the morning and a little after 4 in the afternoon. We have the folder over here, and underneath the folder we have the specific jobs and the time frames that they actually ran in. We see that this paycheck processing job ran right around 4:20 in the afternoon. We see the expense reimbursement actually ran at 7 a.m. since we changed the time frame from it. And that gives you a neat summary view of your particular jobs. Now, let's say we want to save this particular scenario and replay it at a later time. There's a save icon here, and if I click the arrow here, we can do a save as and select the specific name. I'm just going to call it payroll 3, and we can click OK. Now this data gets saved onto the EM server for future reference, and as you can see here, the what if scenario was now named payroll 3. So that's what Forecast can offer you in the GUI. And one additional item I want to show you is in batch mode. Let's say you may have some users who don't have access to the GUI, or you may want to submit the actual forecast as a job. I want to show you what you can do with the Forecast CLI utility. Now, this utility is located under the default bin installation directory of your workload automation client. And over here I'm going to give you the usage syntax of the utility. So I'm typing Forecast CLI, which is the name of the binary, and I will hit enter. And as you can see, it gives you various parameters that you would have to put in. Namely, you'd need a -u for the user, -p for the password or a password file, and various filter criteria to run the simulation. So what I've done is I've prepared a command line here that is going to run the same scenario with the payroll folder, and I'm specifying an order date of December 13, 2013. And this -job_info_file, this is the file into which the forecast output will be saved. Now the file only outputs CSV format. So let's give it a run and see what it actually puts out. Now the command is running, and as you can see, it completed fairly quickly. And to note, you've got various parameters that it's reporting on. Any late services, any services that completed on time, or a deadline is out of the forecast. And then related to jobs, you can see that the not running jobs is 2, the ended OK jobs is 3, and running jobs is 0. So that coincides with what we initially saw when we loaded the particular forecast scenario in the GUI. Now I want to show you another thing here with the actual files that it created. Now this is the CSV file. that got created from that particular command line. And as I loaded, since my system is set up to open CSVs with Microsoft Excel, you can see that the data for the jobs is basically in a tabular format. Now what I did previously was to reformat the CSV file into an Excel file spreadsheet just to show you a better view of what data is actually there. Now I'll open the Excel file. As you can see, you've got the order IDs, the data center, parent table, and I'm slowly going to scroll to the right-hand side to show you a couple other parameters that are present. Now all this information was visible in the GUI. You can see the confirm item over here for that particular job, and you've got the intervals. So basically this would allow you to run the forecast in batch. You could actually submit it as a job as long as the agent has a local EM client available. So there you have it, quite a few items there, both graphically and in batch mode, that can be used to run the forecast. So let's take a look at a couple other scenarios here. Now regarding user dailies, since Enterprise Manager, since the forecast may not be aware of specific user dailies that are defined for your particular data center. Let's say you have one that comes in at 7 o'clock, but it's not the system user daily. What you can do is manually define it under Tools User Daily Definition. And as you can see here, we have the automatic user daily at 7 a.m., which is there by default. But we can also add a second one that is ordered manually, let's say with the CTMUDLY command. This one is called periods, and it also orders in at 7 a.m. So that's something to keep in mind when you're actually running your simulations. Now another thing that we might want to do, there may be rules that we want to set up, the what-if scenarios that we looked at. You might have jobs that require a specific quantitative resource, and that resource will generally not be available in forecast unless you manually define it. So over here in this particular example, you can see that we have a quantitative resource named SAP_all, and we're increasing it by 5 units. You can see here we have the maximum field here, and we have the number 5 here. Another item that you might want to do is prerequisite conditions. Maybe that particular job flow needs a condition from the outside. And in the second example here, we have a condition called daily_sales_report, and it's going to be added at the average job start time on the particular order date. The third item is the confirmation, which we did the live scenario in, and basically we can add the confirm on a specific job and specify the time frame when it needs to run. And also another neat feature is the job runtime. Let's say we want to change the runtime by 20% or change the actual runtime to a specific time. Then we can go ahead and do that and change the scenario. And as always, you could save the particular scenario that you're looking at. Now looking at a review, the calendars that are used by the simulation, you can select either the checked out calendars or the specific one that's checked in. And as I mentioned previously, the checked in calendars, maybe you want to redesign it and reschedule it, and you can use that particular scenario and confirm it before you check it out and put it into production use. And as I mentioned with statistics, the job runtime, you can select whether you want minimum, maximum, or average runtimes, and that will alter the way the simulation completes, and the ignore global conditions option, which allows you to load the forecast scenario for a specific data center rather than relying on any outside conditions that might be coming in from another data center. So regarding some tips and tricks, as with all products, we would definitely recommend that you apply the latest available fix packs. Now, once you update the fix pack for Control-M Enterprise Manager, it will include the fixes for Control-M Forecast. And one of the reasons we ask you to do this is for daylight savings time. There's one consideration here you might want to keep in mind. For mainframe jobs, we have seen where certain forecast scenarios were an hour off from when they should have actually run, and applying the latest fix pack addressed that particular problem. Now, regarding time zones, we have to keep in mind that, let's say you've defined various jobs to run on an agent that's defined to a specific time zone. While that job may run perfectly fine in your production environment, when you're doing the simulation in the forecast may not have that particular time zone definition. So you want to make sure that the Enterprise Manager is also defined with those specific time zones. And you can take a look at that particular knowledge article number on the details on how to do that. So regarding troubleshooting, if let's say you run a forecast scenario and you're not getting the particular results that you expect, or you're seeing something unusual, we will ask you if you can give us some screenshots of the forecast domain window. That would be most helpful. We may also ask you for a manual export of the Enterprise Manager database using the util utility. And the reference knowledge article there will give you the details on how to do that. Another issue that we encountered in the past, let's say when you're doing a migration import, and this was in version 7 and prior. After you did the import with your old data, we saw that forecast all of a sudden turns gray and is no longer available for the users to actually activate and run their simulations. And what we found is that when you run the forecast binary with the -install flag, this will basically go ahead and reinitialize the default values for the forecast application and make it available for use. Now, we want to thank you for joining us today on this presentation, and a couple other notes that I want to mention. We will have an upcoming Connect with Control-M webinar on January 22nd of 2014, and the topic that will be covered is AFT Advanced. So if this is something that interests you, we would definitely encourage you to attend. The sessions themselves are recorded, and if you want to access any of the past recordings as well as this one, they will be posted on the YouTube link that you see there. At the conclusion of this presentation, you will receive a survey, and we would definitely welcome any comments that you have or any questions that you might have. And if there are any future topics that would interest you, we would like to hear from you. You could follow Control-M on Twitter, Facebook, and BMC communities at the link mentioned there. And we want to thank you for your attendance, and we will take some time to answer your questions now. And as I mentioned previously, you can go ahead and type your questions in on the Q&A tab in your WebEx window. And while you're doing that, here's a list of the past webinars that have been recorded. The one prior to this was on the SAP Advanced topic, and it was held on November 13. So please go ahead and take a look at each of those items there, see if something interests you, and you can reference the YouTube link on the bottom of that particular screen to access those particular presentations. We would like to thank you for your attendance. We hope that this presentation proved useful to you.